Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Devotions, another day that the Lord has made. We rejoice and are glad, and it is a beautiful day in God's creation to be able to open up His Word, be blessed by it, be encouraged by it, but really get to see what it is truly all about. It's about Jesus, His authority, His lordship, His blessings, and His discipling of us and His disciples. And so we get to see Matthew chapter 14. We begin with a little bit of history. And it pushes us forward into seeing Jesus, into the incredible Son of Man, Son of God that He is. So with no further ado, Matthew chapter 14, let's read together. It says, "At that time, Herod," now I want to make sure you get the right Herod. It's not Herod the Great, because he was dead in 4 BC, but he had 4 sons, and his 4 sons took over 4 different areas frankly, Israel in that kind of way, split out into that way. So this is Herod Antipas, and Herod the Tetrarch, meaning one who owned the 4th. He was in Galilee, and had his palaces around in that kind of way. But at that time, Herod the Tetrarch, Herod Antipas, heard the reports about Jesus, and he said to his attendants, "This is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. That is why miraculous powers are at work in him." And so we know through history, we know through actually historians, that Herod Antipas really, they say, went crazy. He really went into this mental state that he was very paranoid, and paranoid because of some of the actions he had taken, and that is what John the Baptist called out. Now, we know that John the Baptist was beheaded. And so he's saying that this is John the Baptist come back from the dead. He's risen, and he's doing this miraculous works. And then all of a sudden Matthew takes you back into why Herod would have this kind of paranoia, because John the Baptist was dead. He beheaded him. Now he seems like he's coming back. The prophet is coming back. So it goes back in history. It's a little confusing from verses 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden you get into 3. It's not a chronological order. He's coming back from the dead. He's doing this ministry, but he should be dead because this is what happened some time ago. Matthew chapter 14, verse 3, it says, "Now Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife." Did you get that? Yeah, you got that right. All right. His brother, Herod, Philip, his wife. "For John had been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.'" And so he actually enticed Herodias to be able to come into his palace, into his guardianship, into being his wife. Now, that wasn't unlawful if Philip was dead, because if Philip was dead, then the wife would go to the next brother. So this is not wrong if Philip is dead, but Philip's not dead. He's still alive. So in his asking or his enticing of Herodias into his household, it's as if saying that his brother's dead. And that was against the Mosaic law. So John was bringing this forward into Herod feeling the law, Herod Antipas feeling the law in this way. "For John had been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.'" Verse 5, Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the people because they considered him a prophet. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath, can't break an oath, to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, Herodias, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." The king was distressed because of his oaths and his dinner guests. He ordered that her request be granted, and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. Chronological right before this. All right, we are getting this setting right now. Herod Antipas is this tetrarch that's in Galilee. He's reigning in Galilee, so we're still in the northern part of Israel in Galilee. The Sea of Galilee, as you can see here, not a great map, but I want to kind of sway back and forth to be able to see. You get to see that here's Capernaum, the town of Jesus, as we get to see. We get to see that before he was talking about Bethsaida, there was a woe to Bethsaida. But this is what we're talking about today. We're talking about Tabgha. Tabgha is not really well known named-wise in the scriptures, but this is the place where Jesus fed the 5,000. This is the place where Jesus fed the 4,000. This is a kind of an open field within the area of the shore of the northern Galilee there, just underneath the mount, the hill, the Mount of Beatitudes, or the Sermon on the Mount. So as you can see, it's just right behind me there, but the reality to that is it's not far off from places, and it's not too far. I just want to keep iterating that when you go to the North Shores of Galilee, that could walk back and forth. That's the way they did it. So verse 13, here we go. This miraculous thing that Jesus did, but we're going to set it straight of just more than a miracle that Jesus brought here. So when Jesus heard what had happened to John the Baptist, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place because he loved John. John, his cousin, he was probably grieving because of what had happened. So he got away to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, just right on that hillside, right? A remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. They didn't count the women and children because they would have probably been eating at a separate space. Now, I want to share my screen real quickly with you because I want to walk you through this place. This is Jesus in Tabgha, and this is right on the northern shores. You can't see. I zoom in a little bit on this. Let's see if there we go. Biblical events that took place in Tabgha. The calling of the first apostles, we can see in Mark chapter 1, just right on the north shores of Galilee there. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. It's the shoreline, but the mount goes up. And so if there was a big crowd of people, that's where they would be spaced out to be. A big lawn, a big grassy place in that kind of way. The healing of the leper in Matthew 8. As we just read a couple chapters ago. The miracle of the multiplication, that's what they call it over in Israel. Multiplication of the bread and multiplication of the fish. The feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000 as we get to see there. Just after this, we get to see Jesus walking on the water. We're going to get to that in just a second. And also Jesus met with Peter and his companions after the resurrection. And that is a little closer to it's right by Tabgha. It's just over to the east a little bit to the primacy of Peter there. And so we keep going. So they built a cathedral here at Tabgha to really hone in on a special place of, yes, okay, the miracle of multiplication, but I want to make this a little bit deeper for you. It is a discipleship matter that Jesus wanted to show, that when you look up to heaven, when you are frankly of the kingdom of heaven, as Matthew said, God provides. God provides. God provides the healing. God provides the demon casting out of demons. God provides food and our daily bread. He provides forgiveness. He's going to continue to disciple his disciples so that they get that discipline of knowing what the kingdom of heaven is. He goes, you give them something to eat. Oh, that's right. It's out of your power. But so that you know that the power comes from on high to provide, he looked up to heaven, broke the bread, and gave all the fish. And they had plenty. They were satisfied. God provides a blessing even hundredfold for us to be able to be satisfied. All we need to be is frankly in the kingdom of heaven, and we can be satisfied. And so this was where Jesus was teaching, and so you can kind of see over these bushes there. You can look forward. You can see a little bit of the hills on the opposite side of the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is right over those bushes in that kind of way. And then you step into this church. You step into this cathedral, and this is what they have. It's very simple, but it's really neat. Kind of history that they have within this. They have these mosaic tiles that have been from thousands of years ago that actually the Romans laid. And so as they laid these tiles, they built this church around it because it was kind of like a courtyard, a wine press, as we get to see right outside of this church. But this is the altar, and this is really neat. They kept this huge stone. You see that stone underneath the altar? It has a little candle by it. It's a little bit of a raising up, just right by my arrow here, if you can see that arrow. This is a place where it was just a little higher elevation. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It's a little higher elevation than anything else around the rocks there. And they believe that this was the altar that they brought the bread to and the fish to, where Jesus took up one of the loaves, looked up to heaven, broke the bread, and frankly blessed it, and it multiplied. And so this is that raised rock where they believe this is the altar where Jesus did that. This is kind of a bigger view of the altar and the place that you can kind of stand in. There's the tile that was laid so long ago, mosaic tile. Look at all those little squares, just incredible intricacy in that kind of way. And here's the courtyard and olive trees, and it was an olive press there at Tabgha, as we get to see throughout the northern place of Galilee, great olive trees and the oil press right outside in that courtyard. And so as I stop the share there, I want to now put us into the place of where we're heading, and that is right around the Sea of Galilee. And if you see this right here, Gennesaret, that is a very similar name, similar place than what we would have as you see that the town name of Tabgha. And so as Jesus was there, he fed the 5,000 men besides women and children. They've been eating in separate places. But the bigger part about it is in the kingdom of heaven, God provides what you need. More than what you need. You'll be satisfied with God's provision. And so a great miracle, but it's also to recognize the discipling of what Jesus was doing with his disciples in that way. And so right after this, all of a sudden, we step out onto this incredible, peaceful sea. But not so peaceful. Remember, just right off to the side, here we go, get my fingers right off to the side here, there's this cliff, and I told you about the way of the wind. The wind would come through those hills, and it would come onto the Sea of Galilee and bring out these waves and crashing back together. So as Jesus fed the 5,000, as the disciples were marveled, saying, whoa, I just also want to make sure that that we're referencing this in the right way. How many basketfuls did they have after God's provision, even satisfied, and then even more so? 12, so that each disciple would get a basket. And I just always think that pushes the disciples as it pushes us. God gives us more than what we need. He is so overabundant so that we can even take the leftovers of God's grace and being able to carry it maybe to the towns and villages, saying, even go feed them and tell them what happened here. And out of God's grace, out of the kingdom of heaven, it is always an overabundance of what God provides. Great ministering to us here today. Verse 22, it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray, most likely right up there on Tabgha, up to the mountainside of the Sermon on the Mount. Went on the mountainside himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. Did you notice that in chapter 14 here, 2 times Jesus got away to just spend time with God? That's part of the discipling as well. That's part of the kingdom of heaven as well, that Jesus gets away and speaks to his Father. But when evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch, which is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., according to the Roman rules, the Jewish people had 3 watches at night. The Romans had 4 watches at night. So it began between from 9 to 12 is first watch, 12 to 3 is second watch. 6 to 9 first watch, 9 to 12 second watch, 12 to 3 third watch, and 3 to 6 is the 4th watch. Different watches that they would say, because that's when they fished at night in the Sea of Galilee. It's better fishing at that night. So during the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake, on the sea, the lake of Gennesaret, as they call it. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," if I can believe your words, right? "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." Yo, I just saw you feed 5,000 people out of 5 loaves and 2 bread. I bet you can tell me to come out onto this water and come to you. And Jesus said, "Come." Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. He's walking on the water, a human walking on the water, not Jesus, not the Son of God. Peter walking on the water. But when he saw the wind, verse 30, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand. I love that picture. Immediately. Right? Immediately he says, take courage. Immediately he reaches out his hand to save him. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? Because his eyes were turned to the wind. When our eyes are fixed on Jesus, great is our faithfulness because of his faithfulness. When our eyes are fixed on the things of this world, the wind, the waves, a virus, tragedy, the chaos of this world, when our eyes are fixed on that, our eyes aren't fixed on Jesus. And we too could be called little of faith. So brothers and sisters, keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. He's reaching out to us, reaching out his hand immediately, especially in times of tragedy, in times of trial, reaches out his hands and says, come. Verse 32, he says, and when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. We've seen the multiplication and that God provides. We saw you walking on the water. We saw you call Peter out on the water. And then all of a sudden you get in the boat and creation just goes peaceful because you have all the authority. Truly, you are the Son of God. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret, which is right by Tabgha, as I was showing you before. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched him were healed. And so the journey around the Sea of Galilee, if you really get really descriptive, when they say it went to the opposite place, people might think, oh, he went from north to south. Most likely not. A lot of times he stayed up north. So he went from like the northwest to the northeast and then back and being able to put out. It's not a big sea. You can see it right behind me. It's more of a lake of Gennesaret, Sea of Galilee. And so as he's going back and forth, he's doing it to be able to actually just disciple his disciples. And to bring about the kingdom of heaven in all its truth and all its purity. And he's doing that right in front of them so that they could just confess, truly, you are the Son of God. May we not need signs. I pray we don't need miracles in front of us to be able to confess and believe. Maybe we just need to understand that in our life, God has reached out his hand in love in Jesus immediately to us in our sin. And while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so we can confess with the disciples this day, truly, you are the Son of God. For you've loved me, you've forgiven me, you died for me, you rose for me. And now you've put out your hand and invited me into that kingdom of heaven, into the life of Christ. How blessed we are. How blessed we are knowing that God provides. Doesn't provide food or doesn't provide just the bread and the fish. Doesn't just provide peace. He provides his only Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, to say, I am with you always, even to the very end. Take my hand and I will lead you upon life's way. We are blessed. We're provided with a God that walks with us. Have a beautiful day walking with God.